Okay, so in this lesson, I'm going to get started shading the cucumbers and the top sauce. Now, because my ZBrush file is getting a little large, it's a 7 gig as I mentioned in the last lesson, I have isolated the pieces that I want, and I'm going to save it as a separate file. So what I want to do is all the meshes that I intend on painting in this session, I want to have subdivision level 3 of them in substance. So I'm taking a fairly high subdivision level so I can see the detail a lot better. If you don't want to do this, you can export normals and displacement maps from ZBrush and assemble them in substance, but I don't want to do that. That's just a little too much for me. I prefer to just take a high resolution mesh. Now for the meshes that I'm not going to be painting now, but that I want to be able to see to better visualize my results, specifically this top cheese layer, I want it to be there whilst I'm painting this top sauce, but I don't intend on painting it in this session. It's going to happen further down the line. So I'm just going to have subdivision level 1 of it in substance. So that's why it's over here. If you see, I've set it to subdivision level 1. Now the cucumbers, it's 3 for the other one, 3 for the sauce. And then for the seeds, I know that the color information that the seeds are going to get are not going to be that busy. It's a fairly simple shading result that I need for the seeds. So I'm going to just take subdivision level 2. I don't think 2 and 3 are that different, right? There's not that much differentiation. I could even go with 1, but I decided just to have just a little bit of that detail show. If you noticed, there was some, like if I go to 1, it's almost just faceted, and then 2 and 3 are. Now that I think about it, I don't think 2 is. I think I'm going to take 3. I'll just take 3 for the seeds too. All right, so let me go over here, and this one too, take 3. But one thing I already did was tested this export, and I run into somewhat of an issue. It looks like this top sauce here won't import into Maya in a timely fashion. When exported at subdivision level 3, it's about 300 megabytes on disk, and that's fairly big. So I'm going to take this top sauce right here, and then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll just call this one decimated. All right, so this is the one I'm going to take, and I'm going to solo. And in Decimation Master, I have to make sure to keep UVs because it's going to alter the topology, but I wanted to preserve the UVs. The rest of the settings stay fairly the same, but the amount of deformation that I think will be good is 15. By default, this decimation value is at 20%. I brought it down to 15. And as you can see, the active polygon count here is 364,000. So as I decimate it, you should see the reduction and what we get. So the way you deal with this tool is you first pre-process current. Let me hold down shift and click on the mesh so that hides everything else, just so I'm showing only this mesh, this decimated mesh. And then I'm going to pre-process current. Okay, and once I've pre-processed current, I can decimate current. And now it's 109,000 polygons. So this is what I'm going to take into substance. All right, so now time to export all these. I'm going to hold down shift to show everything again, hide my 300K top sauce mesh. And then with everything selected, I'll make sure this little placard is not selected. I'm going to go Subtool Master, Export, and clear. Yeah, these are fine settings to have on. Clear masking, show hidden points, turn off creasing, that's fine. All right, so here are my files on disk, and these are the sizes I'm dealing with. I do want you to see this so that you can be mindful of it. If you want smaller file sizes for your machine, if your machine specs can't handle it, just decimate all of these meshes. But this is the difference between the decimated top sauce and the not decimated one. So this one is 6 megabytes and this is 33 megabytes on disk. So I definitely don't want this. I'm going to just delete it. And then I'm going to drag these into my Maya, into an empty Maya file. See how they fare. Okay, so everything came in just fine. I'm going to go into UV mode, UV editing mode, to inspect my UVs. Okay, so it looks like it did preserve the UV. I'm going to compare this with my original file, make sure that I do have the same, unhide everything, and select my top sauce and go into UV mode. Okay, so something went wrong because I don't have the other tile. Yeah, I don't have the other tile, so I have to go back into ZBrush. Let me check everything else, make sure that my UVs look good. So this is the first and second. Okay, so those are fine. And the seeds are fine. Okay, all these are one material. Okay, they all share the same UDIM tile. So that should be the case here too. All of these. Yeah, those are fine. All right, so it looks like the issue is that somewhere during all the sculpting and UVing and stuff, my UV map for the top sauce got corrupted. So if I look at the top sauce decimated, if I solo it and I go morph UVs, so if I just go morph UV, the second tile is squeezing down into nothing, like this 1 pixel result. So I decided to check the main one too to see if it had the problem, and it does. So if I come to this top sauce here, I can go to subdivision level 1 and I go morph UV, and it's definitely corrupt. So what I'm going to do is go back into Maya, my main Maya file, and re-export this subdivision level, which is subdivision level 1, the lowest, to send it back to ZBrush to fix it so I get this proper tiling. So I'm going to go File, Export, Action, and I'm just going to call it on the disks, on the file system, top sauce UV fix. Make sure it's set to object file because I'm working with OBJ files, and just call it sauce top because that's what it's called in ZBrush. I'll just go export. Then I'm going to come into ZBrush with subdivision level 1 active. I want to replace whatever I have, so I'm going to go import and navigate to my Maya to ZBrush folder, and this is the top sauce fix. Looks like I made a typo. Top sauce fix, UV fix, and I'll just import it. So now it should have replaced it, and let's check to see if the UV map is fixed. Yes, now the UV map is fixed. You can tell it's 2 different tiles. But the other thing now I do have to check for is I do have to go up subdivision level, make sure that it hasn't obliterated my detail, because it tends to do that sometimes. It usually is the case when there's a layer active, but there's no layer active, or it can be very problematic. So sometimes before you do this, you do have to bake your layer stack and then go to subdivision level 1 and import it. Now that this is fixed, it's time to try this again. And I'm also going to have to replace this in the main file, the 7 gig file with everything, so that both have updated meshes. So now I can delete this decimated mesh, duplicate again, rename this top sauce decimated, go to subdivision level 3, which is where I was, what I want to use. I can go delete lower, delete higher, and focus on decimating at subdivision level 3. So I'm going to keep the same settings, keep UVs, and I want 15% decimation. So I'm going to say preprocess current and decimate current. And now I should have 109,000, and this should be fine. So now I'm going to export this. All right, so it imports into Maya with no problems. If I select it, now I have both UDIM tiles for this decimated mesh. So it worked. It's fine. So this file, I've began preparing it for substance. I went ahead and renamed all the items so that they reflect what subdivision level they are. So for this cheese is subdivision level 1, and everything else is subdivision level 3, and this is a decimated mesh. And I also went ahead and assigned materials and gave each of these UDIM sets the same material that they have in the main file. So in the main file, all the cucumbers are assigned an AISS cucumber matte. So if I go to the main file, you'll see they have the AISS cucumber matte. And I just like this little postfix is AI standard surface. And this one is AISS sauce top and AISS cheese. And so I transfer those names here onto materials that are assigned to this. So this is my file that is going to be used to generate the FBX mesh that is going to Substance Painter. So I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to go File, Export, Selection, and I make sure I have FBX selected. And I have a folder I like to make called FBX Maya to Substance. So I'll click in here and you'll see the top one that I painted previously. I'm going to call this one Cucumbers and Top Sauce. So that's it. All right, so it's time to get my mesh into Substance. I'm going to go File, New. I'm going to use this same PBR Metallic Roughness map. I'll load in with 1K maps. I can change that at any time. And these are the settings, the same settings from the last paint session. Use UV tile workflow. I'm going to select my FBX, go to my Maya to Substance, select my Cucumber Top Sauce FBX. And now hit OK. And it looks like everything came in here with no problems. Let me be sure of that. I have 3 texture sets. Yes, the cheese, which I won't be painting here. I have my cucumbers on their 4 UDIM tiles and my sauce on 2 tiles. So everything looks good in the Substance file. Now, in the previous lesson, you saw me paint all the maps I needed in this base color slot. I'm going to do that again, but I do want to point out that for this asset, I'm going to be using an additional utility map, which is transmission. I'm going to be using a handful of transmission maps. Right now, I can only visualize myself needing one to wire into transmission to let it know which part of these cucumbers up top needs to have some translucency or transmission transparency, basically. But I am also going to paint that here like I did with my roughness map in the previous lesson. If you care about assembling your completed material in Substance Painter and being able to visualize it in the Substance Painter viewer or with the iRay renderer, you do want to utilize these slots. And in this instance, if you feel like you need another slot like opacity, you can add it. There's over here, let me see if I can find it. You can go to add channels and you can pick the various different shading properties that you want, right? So in my case, it may have been translucency, it may be opacity, or some other property in here. But I don't particularly care for it because no matter how much I analyze it in Substance, I realize that when I go to Maya Arnold, the results look, in most cases, fairly different. So I'd rather just send everything to Maya and test it there in my final render environment to make sure it's right. It's time to get started with the painting. I've gone ahead and repeated the action I did before starting the bun, which is crystallizing reference. This is some reference of some cucumbers that I intend on using to help me get a finished result. Now, this is the crystallized version, and this is the original reference. So this is one of the best ones. I picked it because I like the way the gradation feels really good from the skin to the meat of the cucumber. And then there are some other ones that are also nice. And there's this one, which has a lot of good information that I can use to help me determine what's in the back of the cucumbers, because I don't have that information. As you know, my main reference mostly gives me information of the front and part of the side. So I'm going to be doing some invention on the other sides. Another reason why I picked these is because the type of translucency that's happening here, where you can see inside from behind the seeds, I like both of them. There's one here and there's one here that dominates the core more. So since I have 2, I want to try one that's more confined to the seeds and another one that covers more area, not just around the seeds. And I even sculpted it to be that way. There's one of them that at the core, it looks like it's a lot more rotten. And I think that's what determines whether or not it feels confined to the seeds, is if it's a fresh cucumber and it's a younger cucumber, it is not spread. That translucent or rotting feel has not spread to the rest of it. It's more confined to the seeds. And as it gets older, then it distributes and makes this whole mushy feel. And I got it over here, and here, this one will be the one that's more constricted to the seeds. There's also another one here that is pretty nice. It has a lot of good information at the core, and then there's this one. So this is the cucumber reference that I'm going to rely on mostly to shade both of these cucumbers, in addition to the one that's in the reference. And just in case you didn't get to see how I did this crystallization thing, you just go into Photoshop. I have a Photoshop file open here. You go File, Pixelate, Crystallize, and then you just pick a cell size. And then it just sort of unravels the palette for you. All right, so I'm here in ZBrush, and what I'm going to do is create the multicolor base that I told you that I like doing for all my shading. It's something, once again, that I haven't quite figured out how to do with Substance. So I always like to come to ZBrush to get it first. And I have imported some of the textures that I'm going to be using for this. I've imported my main reference and some of my cucumber reference. I'm going to import one more. I'm going to take, I think maybe, I should take two more. I should take this one and go to texture, import, and take this one too. So with all of these, I can now click this and add it to my spotlight. And I can grab them one by one and just add them to spotlight, just so I can get that color data here. And then I can hit this to tile them to the side, and then hit Shift Z to toggle in and out of soft light, and then Z to actually get the icon. So I'm going to go Shift Z to hide everything. I am on subdivision level 5 for this paint work. It doesn't really matter. It's fine. Paint on whichever subdivision level I want. I'm going to grab this and go a little higher too, just so it gives me more pixel resolution to paint on, so I can get a more interesting map. Actually, I'm just going to take these seeds, also send them a little higher so I get more detail in the map, because I'm painting on more geometry. Okay, so that's everything important, has the high subdivision level, and only the top cheese. We're not painting that now, so that doesn't matter. All right, so I'm going to pick now a brighter material or a whiter material to allow me to see what I'm painting. And then with white active, I'm going to go Subtool Master Fill, and I just want to fill it in with a initial white color. So I'm going to go OK. Just going to go through all the subtools and fill them with white. So let me start with the top saw. So I'm going to go Shift Z, go Z, and look for my, looks like I might have left out my main reference. So I'm going to go to Texture, come here, add it to the spotlight, and then I'm going to go crank it up to full opacity, because I want to be able to sample the color data. And then I'm going to hit C on my keyboard while hovering over the color, and then Shift Z to go back. And as I did previously, I'm going to pick color spray right there, and I'm going to pick one of these abstract alphas that I use for the top buns base. So I'm going to navigate to my Pixelogic download center. Everybody should have this in their ZBrush install file. If not, you can go get them at pixelogic.com. And these are the brushes I'm looking for, these abstract brushes over here. I think the last time for the bun I used this one. I might try a different one. I like these really big shapes, the ones with the big shapes in there. So I'm going to try this one. Select it. And with this orange color selected, I'm going to go to my top saw solo. Let me undo that. Looks like I forgot to activate the things that I need. So I have to deactivate add because I'm not trying to sculpt and I want RGB on. Yeah, so this is base color information. Just gonna scatter it all across. I'm gonna go Shift Z and pick another color, maybe that, to make sure I have the tool active. Otherwise, when you sample, you actually don't get the color. Shift Z again, and just play around with a different value, just to get some more discoloration in there. Right. Bottom doesn't matter as much, but top does. Let me try also some of my alpha brushes here. So I'll go with alpha 8, And I'll go C again. Just sprinkle some data. And I should probably also just play around with some more desaturated colors. This time I'm trying to get a lot more information in there. A lot more color information. See if I can find anything else on here. There's a darker color here that I could go with. So I'm going to go Z and then hit C to sample this dark color. Shift Z, and I'm back out. Just some interesting blending. All right, so that should be a good base to play with. All right, now when I go to the cucumbers, you realize that some of them have information on them that is almost sauce. But I want to be very careful with this. I want to handle it inside substance. If you look at the reference, this American cucumber has a lot of sauce on it, but it blends very well with the underlying green. So I'm counting on doing this nice blending in substance. So here I just want a general tone of this skin for both sides. I'm going to start with, find the front. Do this the front. And I'm going to start with this one. Solo it. Shift Z. Z to bring back my spotlight icon. And then sample this green color. Z. And then just block in. Actually, let me get my alpha. It's pretty dark. It's a nice color. I like it. Yeah, it gets a nice little range of colors. And just block in a base. I actually do like this. It's picking some reds too, which looks really nice. And then I'm going to go to this one, solo, Shift Z to pick colors from here. Go C. Z. Just paint again. Also nice discoloration here. All right, let's see what everything looks like. All right, so now it's time to get the meat. So I'm going to go Shift Z and hit Z to get my spotlight icon back, tile everything, and just pick this one. Bring it to the forefront. And I just want to sample this sort of whitish color. So I'm going to go, see, okay, that gives it to me. And I'm going to go with the one we're already on, make the brush smaller so it doesn't invade too much on the sides. Let me solo this. And also turn on back face masking so it doesn't go and paint the sides, which I already have the way I like. And another way to stop yourself from painting on the sides is if you do this, if you angle it in such a way that the camera cannot see that side of the mesh, you won't put any paintwork on there. So at this angle, if I go like this and I go around, it doesn't bleed over as much. I can do the same thing here. And I'll worry about doing that thin line of separation in substance. So this is my meat at the top, and this is at the bottom. I'll play around with this a little bit. Okay, so that's it. Let me sample this again and get this little edge here. Okay, so that should be a good base. Let me try to get it on the other side too. No, I have the wrong color, so I'm going to go Shift Z, go back and grab this color. Shift D again, and come back and get this core. Do the same for the bottom here. Okay, as long as I haven't done too much invasion of the sides, or none at all. All right, so this is a good base. Now it's time to get the seeds, which also have this white color on this greenish hue. So I'm gonna get them, these solo, just all right, so that's good base color information for the seeds. Zoom out and get the last one. But yeah, this appears to be enough. Okay, so now it's time to push this out as a base color map that can be imported into Substance. So I'm just going to go to the multi-map exporter, deactivate normal and displacement, and make sure texture from Polypaint is active. And then I'm going to create these maps. So I'll be back with the maps on disk. Yeah, so when it comes to texture detail like this, it's a pretty quick process. So it took 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So these are the multicolor maps that I just exported. This is for the cucumbers, and this is for the sauce. I don't know why it does this wrong renaming thing, but I'll just rename them. All right, so now we're ready to go into Substance Painter and assemble our multi-color base and our centric base. All right, so we're in Substance, and it's time to get all our preliminary texture maps in here. So I'm going to go File, Import Resources, Add Resources. I'm going to pick all these new multicolor bases, cucumber as a sauce, and I'm also going to pick my AO maps for the cucumbers and the sauce. And that's everything. Go open, and I can grab all these and make sure they are defined as texture maps, and they should all load in now as UDIMs. Those are the cucumbers, and it looks like everything looks right, but there's a problem here with this top sauce. I must have done something wrong with the naming. Yeah, there's a naming problem. So I'm going to delete these two, go back on file system, and make sure this doesn't have that postfix at the end. I'll make sure that is 2. All right, so that should be fine now. So if I go back into Substance and go File, Import Resources, Add Resources, and pick these 2 and open them, make sure I define them as textures and go Import. Yes, so now I have it in here. And if I hit Textures and I say Textures for just a project, I should have everything. So my cucumbers and my top sauce. So let me start with the cucumbers. Come over here, delete the layer that's there. Come over here, delete the layer that's there. Add a fill layer and Alt-click on color because I just want the color data. And this is for the cucumbers. I'm going to drag the cucumber base map in here. Okay, so that's the multicolor base map for the cucumbers. I'm going to call it multicolor base map from ZBrush. I'm going to do the same with the top sauce here. I'm going to delete the layer, add a fill layer, Alt-click on control, Alt-click on color, and drag my map into the base color. or multicolor base map from ZBrush. So it should be good now with these two in here. I'm ready to move on to creating the aocentric maps. Let me set this to base color and inspect them. And yeah, they look good. And then upon time, I can should be able to turn this off and just focus on what I'm painting on. I only need this in here because I want to make sure I get the transition to the cheese well before we get to the cheese, because the cheese is going to happen after I paint their burgers. And perhaps a good thing to do with this cheese is just to add a quick fill layer and just add a yellow color to it. So I'll just come over here, alt click on color, and just sample a yellow color from my reference image just so it sits there. This penetration here is negligible. Don't worry about it for now. For the most part, I'll just work around it. But if it becomes too much of a problem visually, because it is a little annoying. All right, so I am going to do that quick fix because it is kind of a distraction that I don't really want to see. So I'm going to select the top cheese in the file that I used to assemble the substance mesh, and it looks like there it is right there. So I'm just going to select the edge and hit B to go into soft selection mode and just move it out of the way. Move it down. Let me make sure I haven't moved too much. I appear to have done that. Let me go B again, soft selection, but then reduce its radius to just that really small region over there and move it out of the way. Okay, so should be good now. I'm gonna grab all these and re-export them. Export selection as an FBX. I'll pick FBX, replace my cucumber and top sauce, export, yes. So I'll just go into substance and go edit, re-import mesh. Yep, and it's gone. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is create a mask that isolates the skin of each cucumber from its innards or its core. This is going to be very important because they're going to have two different color schemes, and I'm going to work on them separately throughout this entire stack. So I'm going to go to the cucumbers, and for now I'm just going to add a fill layer. I just want a mask, so I'm going to add a black mask to this, and then I'm going to add a paint layer, and I should solo. All right, and then I'm going to go into mask mode. Perhaps I should do a little bit more painting before I jump into mask mode, or do what I did prior and just go in material mode. Just allow me to see the mask I'm creating a lot better. And not that this fill layer matters, but I think it'd be better if I just saw it in black or just a darker color. Let me just go over here and pick something, yeah, like that. For the other one, I might want to change the color. But yeah, I'm going to go in here and paint. And I think over here, you can also do this thing where if you angle the geometry, it doesn't paint on the other side. Confirm that. Yeah, it does a very thin line, which is actually what I want, because I'm going to go and create a thin line myself. What I'm painting right now represents the skin of the cucumber. I'm going to tumble around and get the whole side. Let me turn it upside down. Okay, yeah, I'm definitely going to have to go down here and make some adjustments, but let me get the top side. I think there's a back face masking setting somewhere here. Yeah, back face culling. And it's on, but I might have to dial this up more to make it really respect, not paint stuff that's behind the viewing camera. Might have to increase this value, but it's fine. Just gonna have to go up there and polish it anyway. All right, so now I'm gonna reduce the brush and toggle, hit X to toggle back and forth between while I carefully create a skin, and the separation between the skin and the innards. So be very careful about how thick it is, because it really isn't that thick. It's a very thin layer. Might make it a little thicker than it actually would be. Just for the sake of clarity, just to clarify that there is a separation there that represents something. That looks good. And even though it doesn't really matter, I will get the bottom side. I want this to be a full asset to whoever gets it, whoever's using it, so you can, if you want to explode it with VFX, it just has information all over. When I create assets to distribute on TurboSquid, this is how I think usually. It has to work in every angle. Every piece should be complete. All right, so that's it for one of them. I'm going to pause the video and do the other one, and then I'll be back. Let me just take a look at it to make sure. Yeah, this does need to be cleaned up. So before I leave, I will make sure that I clean this up. You always want to check the other channels to see if you have little mistakes like this. And yeah, it looks like some of these areas also need to be filled in. That appears to be a problem. Let me take a look at what that is. I'll be back with a resolution to this. I don't know what this is. This is an issue. So every time I try to fill it in, it actually fills up somewhere else over there up top. That is a UV problem. So when I go back to my Maya file, this little box here on the UV map, I seem to have made a mistake right there. So this needs to I need to find out where it's supposed to be on this UV. It's not too much of a big deal, so I'm not going to propagate the changes across all the maps, but I will push the fix back to ZBrush, replace this cucumber, this first cucumber with the fix, and re-export that geometry for substance. But I'm not going to rebake normal maps. I don't really think this is a big enough issue that is impacting the normal maps that aggressively. But yeah, these are things to watch out for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the edge and find out where it belongs. Yeah, it belongs over there. So I'm going to take my face and try to position it without making too many alterations. Okay, so it belongs here. I'm going to go face, rotate it, and I'm going to go edge, and I should have a sew command that moves A to B. So let me see if I can, if I go sew, I don't want that. I want might be using the wrong command. I think I should be doing stitch together. Let me move A to B with stitch together. So with this edge selected, I go stitch together. Yeah, I was hitting the wrong thing. It is stitched together. For some reason, I don't know why it wasn't responding, but I'm basically telling it, I want to select this edge and move A to B, and you hit stitch together, and then it jumps to location. And I should be able to do the same thing here and go stitch together. This one will not work too well with stitch together because it's at location. So what I'm going to do is just select the vertex or the UV and actually move it till it's right there. So I don't want to shift this too much, and sew it together just so the UV doesn't make too much of a move. So that's it. That's the fix. And I'm going to update the geometry in ZBrush with this new mesh. And then I'm also going to update the substance file that I used to push out the FBX so I can send these fixes to substance too. All right, so I'm here in ZBrush. I've gone to subdivision level 1. I'm going to import the fix. Called it Cucumber 1 fix. Make sure I retain the old name. Here's Cucumber. And it has lost its poly paint data. So what I could do is undo this, duplicate the result, and then replace this one. So I'll go import, place that. So it loses its color data. That's fine. I'll go shift click to hide everything and show the one that has color. And then I will do a projection, but I want to make sure that the projection is only color. So I go to project, make sure I turn off geometry and turn on color. But before I do that, I do want to check to make sure that this import didn't obliterate the data. Yeah, it's fine. So all the information appears to be there. Didn't lose anything. So I'll turn Polypaint back on. And then I'll go to this one, and under project with just color selected, I'll go project all and say, yes, I do want the Polypaint. So attempting to project from subdivision level 7 to subdivision level 7 was a little ambitious. It almost crashed. Well, it actually stalled, so I quit it. So what I've done is just reduce the subdivision level to about 4 is not bad. It still retains the data. This isn't granular data, so it doesn't matter which subdivision level I projected from, as long as I don't go all the way down to subdivision level 1. So here, I'm just going to go to 4 just to get things moving along and run the project again. So go to project to make sure geometry is off. I only want color information. And then go project. Make sure everything is hidden, otherwise it'll pull from other meshes. I just want these 2 meshes visible. So I'll go project. Yeah, and it pulls the color information. So I can delete this old mesh. Forgot to rename this. English Cucumber. And that's the fix. This should now have the fixed UV. So if I go morph UV, yeah, I shouldn't see any weird things. It's hard to tell the fix from here though, but it's fine now. And so I'm going to push out subdivision level 3 again because that's what I need for substance. So I'm going to push that out to file and I'll be back. All right, so here's my substance file, or the file that I used to prepare my meshes for substance. I'm going to temporarily hide this and bring in the fixed mesh. So I'll drag it into view. And that's it. Before I start preparing it, let me check to make sure it has the update. Make sure the update registered. And yes, we don't have that problematic shell. It's connected where it's supposed to be. And the change is propagated to subdivision level 3. So I'm going to close this, make sure I assign the material I gave it so that it comes into substance correctly. It's Cucumber's mat. There, I can delete the old mesh after I take its name. And paste the changes. Go to Windows just to keep this file clean. Namespace editor, and delete whatever namespaces I have. So this should be fine. I'm going to send this back to substance. So I'm going to re-export this as an FBX, And I'll come back in substance to hit the update button to see if the change is propagated into substance. All right, so I'm back in substance. I'm going to go edit and re-import mesh. Move back to cucumbers. Yes, and the change seems to have registered because that box is no longer there. So I have my updated UV map. Yeah, so I'm going to do these little fixes here, and then I'm going to get the other one done, and I'll be back when I've completed the same steps for the other one. I don't want you to watch me create the other one from scratch. All right, so here's the end result with both masks painted. I ended up picking a red color because I just wanted to be able to see better. This seems to be the best color to pick so I can distinguish my skin from the background, the black background, and the two different colors that are being used on a cucumber. So red it is. This doesn't really matter. This is just holding the mask. So I'm gonna call this the cucumber skin mask. And for now, I'll just leave it as is, or I can just turn it off. And I'm going to move on to the next stage. And what I'm going to do now is repeat the action I did on the top bun with AO centric shading. So I'm going to get my AO maps in here so they can influence what I have. And this, if you remember, was helping me form the base color layer of the top bun. So I'm going to start with the top sauce. And I'm going to go to my textures and go to the project texture so I can have access to all my AO maps. So I'm going to add a fill layer. And in that fill layer, I'm going to add a black mask. And then within that mask, I'm going to add a fill, right? So in here, I'm going to drag my ambient occlusion map in there. And the ambient occlusion map for the top sauce isn't that doesn't have that much interesting information, but we'll still work with it. And right now as is, it's really not, just like with the bun, it's not standing out. So I need to add a levels, and I'm going to push just to tighten it up a bit so that I get a very distinctive separation between its black and white map. And then if you remember, the next thing I did was right click and I added another fill layer. And I'm going to use a favorited alpha or material and substance called the black and white spots. Yeah, and this is what I use for the bun, BNW spots 2. And it's just a noise map or a fractal map that is going to mix with what I've done. So I'm going to drag it in here under grayscale. Okay, so now there it is. It's mixing in with my ambient occlusion map. And then the last thing I did on top here, because of how my black and white map is set up, what I wanted to be doing in mask, I need to invert it. So I'm going to right click, add a filter, and then go invert. All right, so now it's giving me the information in the same way it did for the top bun. And to be clear, what I'm basically saying is the black and white map represents occlusion, right? But here I'm using it as a mask. So it's highlighting the white areas as what I want, but it's the black areas that I want. So that's why I'm inverting it up top here so that that propagates into the final shading. So this is what would be my AO-centric shading. So let me rename it AO-centric shading. And now I'm going to pick a color off screen from my crystallized map. So this little crystallized map here, I'm going to sample one of the colors from it just to get an initial shading. I'll come over here. I'll make sure to hold down Alt and click color because that's the only thing I'm interested in. And I will pick a base color. And I'll play around to find something that's going to work. And I'm also going to go to base color so I can see this thing better. And this is actually very good because if I decide to go down into this black spectrum, it's giving me some initial information that I'm going to be putting in anyways. If you look at the main reference, there's some bits of char in here, but I do need to put them in manually, right? There's too few of them, and that map is giving me too many of them. So I will put these in manually. I won't rely on this centric map to get them in there. But this darker hue that we're getting, I can try to simulate that a little. I just won't vary too far into the darker hues. I'm about to do some painting on top of this, so should mask out some of these. Probably that's what I should do. I should use the painting to mask out as much of it as possible and leave what I want to stand out, and then accentuate those black spots towards the end as I finalize, because those black spots are going to be the last thing I do, those bits of char. So anyway, this is the aerocentric shading for the top sauce. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the cucumbers. So with those ones, we're going to have two. We're going to have one for the inside and one for the shell. So what I could do is just copy and paste this one from the sauce. So I'll go copy layers, come over here and paste layers. And let me paste it again. Okay, so I'm going to hide the first one. This will be innards aerocentric shading, and this will be skin aerocentric shading. And all I have to do is replace the top sauce AO map with the one for the cucumbers. So let me come over here and clear that out. So these are my cucumbers. I'm going to drag this into fill layer here. And I have to do the same thing to this one. And so it gives it some initial gritty information. For the top bond, one thing I did do with this black and white spots map is modulate. I played around with this balance, but I was mostly dialing it down because it was drowning out the detail. Let me see. Let me go to mask. Turn that on. Actually, turn this off. Go here to black and white spots. Go to mask. Yeah, and it's a little strong, so perhaps I should go in and modulate it. Yeah, so it mixes with the ambient occlusion map a lot better. I think I came all the way down to about that much, but I think for here, I'm going to leave them a little higher. Let me look at this one. It's for the skin. Go to mask and see if I can just modulate it just a little bit. For the top sauce, I'll leave it as where it was, but I can always come back and play around with these values. What I'm going to do right now is immediately pick some colors, and I'm going to need an actual a lot more than these two. So I'm going to group these two, and these should be for the English cucumber. So I'll group them. Say English cucumber. And then I will duplicate this layer. And this one will be for the American cucumber. And I'm going to add a mask now here, a geometry mask, and tell it for the English cucumber. I obviously only want the English cucumber geometry to be impacted. And then I'll do the same thing here. And I want only the American cucumber to be impacted. So now I have two different options for the various cucumbers. All right, and then let me show this as I pick these colors. All right, so I'm going to start over here with the American cucumber, and I'm going to sample off screen to get some color data. So with the skin of the American cucumber, I'm going to pick something in that vicinity. And one thing I do want to remember to do is to grab my skin mask and incorporate it up here so that this green color only affects the skin. So one way I could do that is to group this again and copy this mask and paste the mask here. Let me first add a black mask and then paste into mask. Okay, so now the green color I selected only impacts the skin. And it looks like I might have to invert it. For some reason, I thought that I could, I don't know why I thought I could get away. Well, with the rest of the shading, I am going to count on the mask, just this mask, to sit on the uppermost layer. Like whatever shading is now for the skin sits on the uppermost layer. So then I wouldn't need a mask for the innards because it'd be under it. But for what I'm doing right now, I do need another mask, right, for the innards. So I'm going to group this, add a black mask, and I'm going to copy and paste this mask. So I'm going to copy this mask and paste it into this group. And then I'm going to invert it. So I'm going to right click, add a filter, and invert it so that it only impacts the meat or the innards. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick the color data that I want. So if you remember, I said I was going to use these images. So I'm going to be sampling from some of this white information. So I'm going to pick for this fill. I'm going to pick a value there. And that's a little too bright. So let me find a more darker hue like that. So that's one side, and I'm going to repeat the action on the other side. I'm going to try to label these folders intelligently so I don't get confused, because this is really a lot of nesting of information. So I'm going to call this skin mask. I'm going to call this innards mask. So I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. So I'm going to group these two. And I could actually copy the masks from these two. So I'm going to add a black mask here and add another black mask here. And this is going to be the skin. So I can just copy and paste the mask for the skin. So I'm going to copy mask and paste into. And then I'm going to do the same for the innards. I'm going to copy mask, and down for the English cucumber, I'm going to paste into. So this will be the innards mask, and this will be the skin mask. And within it, I'm going to go ahead and pick a skin for my English cucumber. So I'm going to sample off screen and pick, yeah, that's a good starting point. And then for my innards, I'm going to go pick another color from my cucumber reference. I'm going to sample off screen. And from here on, I'll just play around. Yeah, and that should be a good base. So this is my centric data in here. This one is less interesting, so I could play with it here. Let me moderate the color a bit. Yeah, just want some high contrast results, so I can start painting on it. The objective is to get these AO maps to give me some interesting information that helps to form a base. So I'll get that whichever way see fit. So yeah, this is good. This one is a lot more interesting. This one is a lot greener, but I will go in the back of this one and give it some information that is closer to this. So the American cucumber, I will be playing around to give it some of this information in the back. But in the front, I'll make sure that it matches the main reference. And in the main reference, it's mostly green and less of that partitioning, right? And this won't really matter. What I do in the back won't really matter unless you're using this asset and decide to take off the top button, right? But I still want there to be some interesting information back there for you. So we'll see if it works. So anyway, that's it for the setting up of the centric shading. I should label this properly. Cucumber centric shading. Centric shading. All right. And this mask I can do away with because I have it, but I'll just keep it down here. It doesn't really matter. I'll keep it off and down there. And the top sauce is fine. It's the only item on here, so I don't have to differentiate its centric shading or put it in a folder because it's the only item on this texture set. All right. That's it for the centric shading. It's time to start doing some painting. And by the way, if you're having a problem processing what I just did with these cucumbers, because this feels very confusing, just imagine I just did one of them, right? I just did one for the English cucumber and then duplicated it and then created a geometry mask that says just affect the one on this side and you just affect the one on this side. Oh, and then I did actually leave out one thing. You saw me leave out the seeds. So the seeds have to get the same treatment. Not as complicated as this. I think with the seeds, I can go with the same color. I can shade them together. So what I'm going to do is just grab my the most important node in this thing, which is one of these. I'm just going to copy layer, come out here and just paste it in. Call this seeds. And I think with the seeds, I could just go with a geometry mask. So I'm going to go with the mesh names and just pick the seeds. I'm going to come in here and sample something off screen for them. They're really the same color as the innards, but I'm going to try to pick something that is a little bit different, just so they stand out just a little bit better. I'll pick about that color. And since this is sitting on the uppermost layer, it will replace everything underneath it. So I don't really have to worry about what happens to it in these two folders. But if it really does matter, I can always come over here and just exclude them because they're not really going to be shaded with what's happening over here. But I like the idea that it's on a separate layer. That means when I isolate, I can get to see them and paint the whole thing. All right, so yeah, I'll stick with the separation. And just for clarity, because I don't want to come back to this folder and get confused, so I will exclude them from here for now. I'll just remove the seeds from there and remove it from there. Okay. And just let this be responsible for shading them. All right, so it's time to start painting. I'm going to start with this top sauce. Now, to be honest, when it comes to this top sauce, it looks almost done. The only thing I really want to do, I think I have maybe like 3 things that I want to do to make it more interesting or closer to what I'm seeing in my reference. It's really just a big pile of sauce fluid. There's some discoloration that I want to mimic. Like there's this really dark hue that's around these areas. In the front, I'm going to put them exactly where they are here, and then I'm going to pick some other strategic areas. Then there's this weird lumpiness here. These big splotches too. That might be something worth trying. But the other thing I really want to get is I don't know what this is, whether it's this particles, this really patchy particles of a lighter part of the sauce. I don't know what it is. I don't want to believe it's cheese, but it's somewhere down here, and I think I'll pick some other places to put it. And then the last thing I want to do is, as I mentioned, these dark spots. I don't know if it's something that's in the sauce or it's part of the char. I think initially I called it char, but I doubt there'll be char all the way up here. Just know that there are these really smaller dark spots. So I'm going to start with the big splotchiness. I'm going to add a fill layer, add a black mask, add a paint. I'm going to go with this really aggressive brush, Kyle Spatter brush. I'm going to introduce my color. Let me make sure I sample it. Actually, I might I could start like this first and just get it in here. Be careful. I do want it to end up forming larger shapes that combine together. So I'm keeping the application. I'm doing like a double application in certain areas. I'm going to confine it to this region. Let me try to add some more. This will be a darker value. Just pick some strategic areas and put it in, just so we don't have like the same consistent color all throughout. All right, so that should be enough. Now let me pick that color. It's pretty dark, but I don't like how saturated it is, so I'll bring it down into here a little. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is I don't want to use the same brush, but I think I could get away with using the same brush. Let me duplicate this and add a black mask. And for now, I'll just set it to white so I can see what I'm doing. It's a more yellowish color. And I'm going to put in now. I'll add a paint there. And this one I definitely wanted to combine a lot more to create a larger splotchy shape. And I'll pick another area to put it here. And that should be it. I don't want to go too far. Maybe just a little bit here. So it's more yellow-like color. Let me sample it from the image. Yeah, I might have. Something like that. Just creating these patches of discoloration. All right, and then the other one that I want to get, this one I'm going to use the dirt brush for this one. Let me just add a fill layer, add a black mask, add a paint layer. I don't think dirt is the brush that I want. I might want dots. Actually, I could use dirt as long as I do a subtraction. So if I put this here, really high density, and I hit X to subtract. I actually don't like this application. I want it to be significantly smaller. So I'm going to undo. So I'm going to make the brush a lot smaller. Hit X. And then I'm going to grab the dots brush and use it as a subtractor, so I don't have the same type of information. I do realize that the Kyle spatter brush could really be useful here too. So let me try it initially as a subtractor. It's very intense, so it gives a very nice, strong result. So I'm going to apply and subtract until I start seeing some of the shapes I'm seeing in the reference. Let me try this one too, the Polyhaven brush. Make it smaller. And use it as a subtractor on the outskirts to blend it better into the mass. Smaller yet still. I'm going to intensify this when I'm done painting them. Yeah, it feels somewhat like it. Let me try using this all over. So I'll start with the cowl splatter, just in strategic places. And then I'll grab the Pollock. And I completely forgot about my mold brush. It would have worked really well for those large shapes up there. I might use it to put one more tier of splotchiness at the top, but ultimately this will work. For this particular sauce, using so many layers could be overkill. It sells just fine with the information on it. I'm gonna find some other strategic areas to put it. It's a nice effect, and if it turns out correct, it'd be nice to see it in other areas. Okay, so now I'm going to pick the color for it. Come over here, try to sample. Okay, I'm going to cheat a little bit because it looks like I might not have gotten the value that I wanted, so I'm going to crank it up. Yeah, like that. So it does stand out. And just one more thing to go to get this thing looking the way I want. So I'm going to add one more fill layer, add a paint, add a black mask, add a paint layer, and I'm looking for those black spots, whatever they are, whether they're pieces of whatever was used to create the sauce or they're char. It's time to get them in there. I'm gonna grab my hard brush that has a little bit of gradation. Start working them in there. I actually will use my brush instead of my basic hard because I want some really bold results like that. Yeah, stands out really well. Be very careful though because it's not really all over the thing. It's just in. Might over exaggerate how much of it is there and try to not stick with the same shapes or same spacing. All right, so I think that's enough. Once you get some of them in there. Yeah, so it breaks it up, makes it feel very interesting. All right, so that's about as much as I want to do with this sauce. One thing I might end up coming back to do is making it merge with this yellow a lot better. And to be honest, I can actually do it right now in a separate layer. let me take a shot at it. So I'm going to add a paint, add a black mask, add a paint layer. And I'm going to pick a yellow hue that is at the transition point between this top sauce and this cheese. And it's I really need to go into that yellower spectrum. And I'm going to grab maybe my smooth normals and see if I can create a transitionary hue that just ties it better to what it's contacting with, even though we haven't painted the cheese yet. And if need be, I'll come back and revisit this particular layer if it's not blending well in my, let me see if find a better brush. Let me try my mold brush. Let me also make sure that it's actually, yeah, it's getting in there. So I'll focus on just helping it. It's a very subtle hue change that will help to tie it to the cheese a lot better. Definitely more intense at the exact connection point. And when it starts getting this faceted, it's not a bad idea to come in here and change the texture size so I can actually see what's happening, what type of information I'm putting down. This is going to help make it a more cohesive piece. Let me take a look at it now. Yeah, it's this kind of hue that marries them together a lot better. Let me toggle it off. Yeah. So it makes it feel more connected. And it's something I can go ahead and do all through here. All right, that appears to be about enough. All right, so this is going to be the final base color map for the sauce. And if I need to come and make some additional modifications, I will. I suspect I might come and do like this nice little spray coat on it with one of these dots or dots erase brushes, but I think for now it's fine as is. I'm going to get started with English cucumber. I'm going to add a fill layer, and I know I need my skin mask. I'm going to start with the skin. I'm going to copy mask, add a black mask, and paste mask. Okay, so this now, if I go to mask, should be both of them masked, but I'm going to create an overarching folder. And actually, that is what is going to receive the mask. That way, all my paint information can just go in this folder. My paint information for this skin goes in this folder. So I'm going to go copy mask, add black mask on the overarching folder, paste mask, and then I can remove it from here. So I'll just add a black mask here and add a paint layer. And what I'm looking to do is get started off creating some partitions with a brighter hue that is more in the more yellowish spectrum. And I'm going to try my mold brush. And I'm going to start creating these partitions. So let me sample the color I'm looking for. That's the color I'm looking for. So this lime green type of, and I'm going to start with this mold brush and see what it does. I just want to create some interesting partitions, and they're going to be confined more to the top and the bottom, and only in certain places. Yeah, like that. I'm gonna go around, continue this application. Sometimes I'll go for these larger shapes. I'm gonna go to mask so I can see the partitions better. And fix them if need be. Let me check the mask to see if I've gone all the way around. Yes, I have. Just make sure that these shapes marry well. All right, so the first pass. And again, I'm going to name this whichever brush I used on it. That's what I was doing in the past, so it's mold. All right, and the next thing I'm going to do is add another paint layer. I'm going to grab my dots erase brush, go into the mask. I want to see the mask. I want to make sure I'm blending this at the transitionary points in an interesting way. So very careful with application here. Get some nice dotty information at the outskirts. And go all the way around. Get that nice transition. Let's see what it looks like. It's somewhat negligible, but it's there, and as long as it's there. Go back to mask and give it a coat all around. Make sure it transitions nicely. All right, so that should be it. Just inspect the base color. That should be it. This is fairly high contrast. It's a lot more high contrast than what's in our reference. But I know that the subsurface will diffuse it a lot. And so will the additional effects that are coming on top of it. And some of these interesting spots in here. It looks pretty good. So I think that's as far as I'll go with the skin. Waiting to see what the first render looks like. and then I'll make some choices thereafter. Make sure this is capitalized because I did that for the English folder. And okay, it's time to move on to this skin. Now, just to further isolate all this painting here, I'm going to make sure I add a mask. Make sure I've only painted the American cucumber. I'm isolating all the paintwork to this. Actually, sorry, I'm making a mistake. This is in fact the English cucumber. So I should be isolating English. All right, so now with the American cucumber, let me just duplicate this. Call it American cucumber skin. Make sure it's has the American selected. Go in there and make sure I add a black mask. And I'm going to hold off on the name till I figure out which brush I'm going to use. I did start off by saying that I was going to paint this one to have a more interesting skin like this, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to stick with what's in my reference. It looks like one that's, for the most part, very green, right? So I don't want to deviate too much from it. I think that these work together with this one having a lot more discoloration and this one being a flatter value. So I'm going to stick with that. I do want some gritty information on it though. So I'm going to grab probably my Kyle splatter brush, look for a green hue, another green hue in the crystallized map. I'll come over here. Maybe sample that green. It's a good green. And add a paint layer. Okay. I'm going to start coming in here and doing an application. Let me make sure I have, yeah, it's there. So we get some grittier information on the surface. Let me look at the spacing of this brush. Tighten it up. Set it to the lowest 5 so that I get more scatter with application. Myself some interesting information. And one good thing to always remember is when you're applying these like this, it's always a good idea to partition them as best as you can. To confine them to partitions, it makes for some more interesting shading. I might have been a little too ambitious here. I'm going to erase and add to create interesting partitions. Okay, so make sure call it whatever I used to paint it. Tiles spatter. And for now, that's it with the skin. This is going to get a final painting because all this is sauce and have a very interesting way I want to deal with it. So I'm going to come back to this skin. But for starters, that's going to be the skins of these cucumbers. I don't like this little black spot that seems to be coming from the ambient occlusion map. Just want to find it. It's that. I'm gonna add paint layer on top of all this and just kind of get rid of it. Grab one of these, my basic hard maybe, or basic hard soft, and set it to black and just blot that out. It's time to move on to the innards of the cucumbers. As I mentioned before, these are the references I'm going to use. This one and I think it was that one. These two are the ones I'm going to be using. This one is really interesting too, so I might go with this. It has a lot more interesting discoloration. Yeah, I think I might go with this one and that one. So one of them is going to look a lot whiter at the core, and the other one is going to have a little bit more discoloration, just so I can have something different. This is definitely going to be for the American cucumber, and I'll use this one for the English cucumber. So let's get started. I'm going to create the two folders that are going to be representing the inside. I can actually just duplicate these two. Just go D, Control D to duplicate them. I will call them the innards. All right, then I'm going to go into these respective masks. Actually, no, these ones. These masks right here represent the skin. So if I go to mask, yeah, represents the skin. And this is, let me see if I can get that out of there. Yeah, shade it out. Okay. And what I want to do with this is just add an invert node. So I'm going to add a filter and invert. So now I'm only painting on the inside. Definitely want to clean it up a bit. So maybe I can take this X, get my hard brush, do a little bit of cleanup. Should be able to turn on invert. It works underneath the node. So even though I'm painting white, it's clearing it out. Okay, so that's the folder ready to color the innards of the American cucumber. And I can do the same for this. Go to mask. And this one looks to be a lot cleaner. I can add a filter and add an invert. Okay, so this is ready for painting. All right, so I'm going to go within this folder, and with the color I have in here, I'm going to add a black mask to clear out all the color information. Do the same here, add a black mask, and just for now leave it open until I figure out what I'm going to be using. So the first thing I'm going to do is, this is the English cucumber. I'm going to duplicate this. I'll use it as a template. And I'm going to create the gradation that's on the outskirts of this thing that comes to the center. I'm going to make sure that it's a hue that is close to the hue of the skin. Now that I look at it, to be a little bit more careful with the skin here, my plan to let it be really high contrast definitely needs to be discarded because it's going to make for a not so accurate skin. So let me go back down here to my English cucumber. And let me find my centric shading. Yes. And I'm going to modulate this color. I'm going to play with this color a bit to get it into a brighter spectrum. Like that. Yeah. I think that works. And I may not have done as good of a job. No, I think I'll leave it. I was going to complain about the skin mask, but I'll leave it. I think it's fine that I went just a little bit thicker. All right. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to take my smooth normals for this one. And I'm going to start with a gradation. Add a paint layer. Isolate color and sample value that I can start painting in at the edges. I'm going to go smooth normals. And then I'm going to start introducing this color. Let me see if it's actually taking. It is. Yeah. This will be some manual. Gradation from the edge. And I want it to be a little softer. So that's initial gradation. Let me solo this and go do the same for the bottom. Make some interesting shapes too. So I just don't have like a rim on there. Okay, I'm going to do something similar for the American cucumber. So let me unsolo over here. And I'm also going to call it, let me duplicate this, show it, call it smooth normals. Add a paint layer. And I'm going to sample something off screen to use here. I'm going to pick the exact same colors for both of them. I want them to be somewhat different. Okay, so start here to get that first tier of gradation. All right, so that's the first tier of gradation. And now I'm going to do the second tier, which is significantly darker. So I'm going to duplicate this. This one's going to sit up top. And let's start with the American cucumber. And let me add a black mask and add a paint layer. And this one I'm going to accomplish with a more interesting brush. I could try dirt. I'd really have to go in there so I can confine it. Let me pick color that I need, a darker, significantly darker color. And let me try dirt, see what it's gonna do. Yeah, it's fairly interesting. Maybe too interesting. Might either have to be blurred a bit. I'm just gonna keep it confined to the edge. Let me make sure I name it so I know what I used. Dirt 2. And a few applications so that it has a really dark color emanating. Okay, yeah, starting to look very much correct. Go to the other side. So that seems to work. And what I'm actually going to do is do a little bit of a blurring. So I'm going to right click, add a filter, add a blur. Yeah, just a little, once a 0.5 blurring is fine. All right, so that's one side. And for the other side, you get that on top, turn it on, add a black mask, just to make sure I'm clearing it out. And I'm going to pick a suitable hue from the other image, add a paint layer, and get started here. I did say I was going to use another brush. I should have tried something else, but it's fine. I'm already using dirt too, so. But it's good to make it so that when people are looking at this stuff, they're seeing different shapes, different interesting shapes with, and not just some underlying shapes that are pretty much almost the same. So it's good to break things up like that. All right, so that's the English cucumber. And I'm going to do the same thing here, add a filter, and add a blur with the default settings. I should blur it in some. Okay, that looks good. The next thing I'm going to move on to is a mask that's going to also be really important for determining where my transmission or where my translucency effect is going to be. So let me duplicate. For the English cucumber, I did say it was going to be significantly different. One of them is going to have a mushier core and the other one isn't. So I'm going to grab new material and sample that core. And when I'm talking about the core, I'm talking about this right here, this innard here. To create the outskirts, I sampled the respective outer color here and this too. And now I'm going to be painting this for the English cucumber. So this core in here. So for this, I am going to turn on material because I want to be able to see it better. And let me see what the color is feeling like. I definitely want a bolder brush, but something that I do have a little more control over. So I'm going to go with my cement brush, cement 2. I'm going to make sure I add a black mask, add a paint layer. Okay, we can get started here. It's going to encapsulate the seed. Have a very unique pattern. It's tempting to make. It's interesting partitions. See what it feels like. mask. Okay, it feels good. What I might not be liking is the value, color value. It's definitely too bright. I do want something in this region and a lot of that. So I'll later come back and take this mask and play with it to get my translucency core. But there is something else I want to do. I want it to be, I want 2 tiers of color because I don't think this is going to be enough to sell it. So I am going to duplicate this. Make sure I put cement 2 in here. And I'll be back to do the back side, but I just want to make sure that I nail down a formula for this top area. I'm going to duplicate this, add a black mask, add a paint layer, and pick a darker value. Maybe play around here, less desaturated. Come in here and vary this. That might be a little too dark. I may actually use my smooth normals for this. I'm just trying to create some different tones in there to make it more interesting. It'll feed my subsurface map some more colors in there, which will make a translucency feel more interesting. But I may have gone a little too desaturated, so I'm going to saturate it a bit more. Yeah, like that. And I do want to make sure I call it smooth normals. Go in here and play a bit. All right, I'll take that. Feels good. Okay, so I'm going to go do the same thing on the other side. Solo. And I may have to unsolo and just hide my sauce and my cheese so I could see underneath. Start defining this. This one is not that important. I just want to make sure I do get the same type of patterning. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Go here and put the okay, that should be enough. And it's time to go do the same thing to the other side. So cement 2 and smooth normals that I used to do this. So I'm going to duplicate this. Start with cement 2, turn it on, and sample a core from the other reference, one of those colors. Add a black mask. add a paint layer, grab my cement too. And with this one, I have to be very careful because I want everything I'm painting to be confined to the seeds a lot better. Let me see if let me see, material will help me to achieve that a lot better. It's not a spread. I did say it's fresher. Okay, that's very tense. Get the other side in. Okay, and then let me duplicate this layer, add a black mask, for smooth normals, pick another color from that core, much darker hue. Come in here, add a paint layer. Okay, doesn't look like this is that varied of a value. So let me change the value some. And then come in here and add more of discoloration to break this up. But I do realize that these cores do have to be painted, so I need to be shading them in just in case somebody takes the seeds out. It does need to make sense. Let me solo this. Yeah, they were painted. I'm sorry, I was looking at the seeds, but I do need to fill them in some here, so make sure that all these can be a gap here. Unify this color a bit more. Go to the other side, do something similar. Okay, so this seems to be it. I should be working to smooth this out a little bit more, specifically on this top part. All right. And I do think that I may have underserved here. And there's supposed to be a lot more of that translucency here. So let me go into the English cucumber, go to my cement. And I should have had a lot more here. This core needs to be filled in more. I'll go to the smooth normals, add some of that color too. I did say that this one is a lot mushier. One thing I'm going to do is play with this color a bit so that it matches the shell slightly. It doesn't have to be the same color, but they sort of need to be in the same, fairly closer to each other as far as the color is concerned. So I'm going to go a little bit into the yellow spectrum here. I'm going to come down. Yeah, like that. And I'll see what it looks like my first couple of renders, and I'll come back and make the necessary changes. Right now it's hard to believe it will work as well because just looking at the base color. So we'll see. And I was going to do some additional painting on the inside core, but I don't think I need it. I'm going to do some gritty painting, but I think this is fine. I'll take it as is and wait to see what the first experiments look like. Yeah, and maybe I should, I think the other one is fine, but maybe this one, I could push some of these and just, let me go back to my dirt 2. And push a little bit of these, just a little bit more. All right, this cool non-destructive workflow lets me come back and play around. So I'll just stick with this and see what this yields. All right, so it's time to finalize this base color painting for the cucumbers and the top sauce. And I'm going to deal with the sauce on the skin, but I'm not going to confine it to the skin. I don't think it's necessary. If it comes down to it, I will, but I think it should be fine painting where I need to paint. So I'm going to add a fill layer, and I'm going to add a black mask as I usually do. Add paint. And I'm going to paint both of them together. I don't think I should have that much of an issue. And I'm going to first go to base color. Let's look at some of these colors and sample for this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to sample the brightest color. First well, not the brightest, but one of the lighter colors. I'll alt click on color, and then I'll pick this one. Let me make sure I got what I wanted. That one. Okay. Come over here, go to my paint layer, make sure I'm on my material so I can see this thing better, and solo. And all of this is going to be sauce. But with the color I have right now, what I want to do is use a smooth normals. This is I'm going to use to try to capture the outskirts of this thing. I'm going to go back and paint the core with a lot more intensity, but this is about getting some very light information on the transitionary points. If I have to, what I'm doing right now will be, the opacity will be reduced so that the underlying green can show through. Too far. I'll take some liberties. Go into the cucumber shell a lot more with this. I'm going to get really granular with the brush. Probably what I should have done. Some of these areas. It's a more interesting detail rather than just big blocky information. All right, so that appears to be what I'm looking for this first pass. Sauce on outskirts. cucumber shell. And then just call it skirts, salsa, not skirts. And I will unsolo, bring back my base color, duplicate this, add a black mask, and I'm going to sample the darker value. Add a paint layer here. I'm going to solo, and I'm going to go for a bolder brush. I want to use basic hard, but I'm going to be a little bit more careful. And this is a very strong brush. It will really have its way. So I'll rather use the basic hard and press to get the intensity that I want. Yeah, it's a very aggressive brush. And make my own definitions. Well, or just try to adhere to what I sculpted, like in this region. Actually, a more meaningful name, because I'll know what this is and I turn it on and off. So I'll just, as I've done previously, make sure it's named after whatever I used. This is basic hard. And actually, I want to do another coat of something else. So I am going to call this one basic hard paint. Basic hard. And then I'm going to add another paint layer. I guess I can now give this another name, sauce main. Main core or something like that. And here I want to use, get some more interesting detail in here. With the help of one of these dirt or pollock, this cow spatter perhaps will be a good result. Let me see what it's looking like first. I just want it on the outskirts. Add some little bit of like more interest to the transition, and it doesn't need to be everywhere. And I'll probably play with some of the other ones, see whether it's going to produce a better result. I'll make sure to so this is dots, also working, try dots erased. Yeah, it's supposed to provide some very nice light transitioning. I'll name it probably dots erase, because I think that's doing a bit more of what I want. It's a nice thin transition that I like, helping to blend a lot better. And go with base color. Yeah, that's going to help me see this a lot better and do blending a lot better. Yeah, these little harsh edges, I'm really a fan of them. So this is going to help. A lot of this is also under the fold, so you need to be mindful about how much time I dedicate to the parts of it that are really in the sauce. Because if I turn this on, see, a lot of it is underneath, so I gotta be careful. I'm not doing too much work in those areas. I really should also paint this whole bottom side sauce, but I think, yeah, I think I might need to do that. I might need to go down there and give it a coat of just all sauce, because it's really sitting in there. So okay, that feels good. Now let me go ahead and do this thing quickly. So here I used a handful of brushes, so I can put them there. Dots erased, dots, and tile spatter. But I'll keep dots erased at the front because that's the main one I used. I'm gonna go down to this basic hard, and yeah, this might have been, most of the painting I did here might have been a little bit redundant. Here, I'll just put it in as a new paint layer. And if I don't, I decide I want to show this bottom side, or if whoever's using this decides they want to show it, they can erase it. So I'm going to put it over here and say basic hard painting bottom. I'm just going to fill it in with or I can make a more interesting kind of shading down there, where it's not entirely coated, but it looks partially coated from being just dipped into it. Even though, yeah, if this was in sauce, if it was dipped in sauce, probably the whole thing will have sauce in it. But I want to refrain from doing that. It just feels a little cheap. Let's just assume somehow that this central part didn't get as coated. But for those who have access to this, you'll have this file, so you can come over here and just turn this off, or turn any of these off if you just want to turn this back into a full cucumber or something. All right, so that's it. This, go over here and just fill this out just a little bit better. Look at what I have, and that's not bad. Yeah, it's good to see some of the green right there. Let me go back here, go to my dots erased. Actually, no, I'm going to go back down here to my smooth normals and improve the blending just a little. Not everywhere. Some areas I want that harshness, but ultimately I do need to blend some of this stuff better. I do think I'm going to do one more thing. Try to create some better patterns, because as is. Okay. And I will deal with this one shortly. I'll get some of this information in here. There is one more pass that I want to do. I just want some lumpy detail in here, darker. So I'm going to duplicate this, add a black mask, add a paint layer, and I'm going to pick a significantly darker. I'm going to go down here, go a little bit into the red. Yeah, like that. And then I'm going to see what it feels like to splatter some of this dark color in here. Looks like I added one too many paint layers. Remove that. Okay, let me see what it feels like. Yeah, that's a bit aggressive. Let me solo. Yeah, that's a bit aggressive. Let me. I do not want to create any hues that aren't really here though, so let me reevaluate this plan here. Yeah, and just end up with something a little bit like that. Well, it's pretty much the same color, just a different. Calls Kyle's splatter. Just want some different shapes in here. Mask them so they form more cohesive, completed shapes. I have to put it everywhere, but just to break up that a little bit. I think it works. I really should go back down to these smooth normals and do a much better job with this blend. Some better transitions. Zoom out and get some better transitions. I'm going to need a lot of these masks because I'm going to need to isolate the roughness map that whichever roughness and spotty highlights I choose for this need to extend to a majority of these. So these masks are going to be very useful in the next lesson when we're working on the roughness and other maps, other utility maps. There's a little there. There we go. Just marry these forms together a little bit better. Some of them are just floating and looking weird. All right, so I think I'm going to settle with this. And let me go and get a lot of this information also onto the other side. So here we're looking at the front, and I said I'm not going to bombard this with so much of that. So I'm going to get a little bit of it in here. This is more so the soft one. This I might just apply just this because I think it could survive. But maybe not. I might need to go in there and also get some of that harder coat in there with the basic hard. Try as much as possible to hide this harsh transition between them. Yeah, actually, I might need to give it a very good coating of this. Even if this is the only coating I give it, I might need to do it very well because that very harsh line that separates these two materials is not going to be as attractive. So it does need more of a coat than. And actually, I'm not even exaggerating. I think I might have made a wrong analysis thinking there wasn't going to be as much. If you look at the reference, there's going to be a lot of sauce here that transitions, and I'm going to have to paint a really hot highlight. I'm going to use the same technique that I use on the top bun. It's something I discovered in this course, and I like it. This glossy hot spots. I'm going to use it to paint wetness in the next lesson. But let me finish this and just focus on this base color getting done. Yes, this lesson might be running. I don't want it to run over 2 hours, so I'm gonna wrap this up. All right, so when I tumble around, I have very nice transitions all through here. Very nice, clean transitions. And just to really do one more pass of nice, clean transition, I'm going to come over here, and since this is a darker color, I wonder if I could, no, I might need to come in here and grab my basic hard. I can come here and yeah, that's going to be a better transition. So for some of these areas where it's darker, it's going to transition a lot better with this. So let this be at the base. Yeah. Feels really good. Get rid of this harsh line that I'm seeing. This is fine because it does have a lighter surrounding it. Try to be consistent. I think there was one particular area here that had to a dark transition that probably doesn't benefit as much. So here, maybe I could get away with it. You go see the front. Yeah, some of these areas here could definitely use that. I'm gonna make sure I'm paying attention to the areas that are in fact going to be exposed in the main view. Most of that stuff in the back is covered with the top bun. All right, yeah, it does look cohesive. All right, before I go, there are two more things that I forgot to address. For the cucumbers, I did, or at least the American cucumber underneath it, I did coat it so that it looks a lot more realistic when you take it out or you decide to deal with it as a single prop. So I need to do the same thing here too. But I'm going to use the this soft smooth normals layer to get it in. So enough data here. Yeah, that feels like a probable result for it sitting in there. There would be a lot on here too, but I'll just leave it as is. I think this looks believable enough. And the other thing I didn't do too much of is touch the seeds. The seeds, I didn't give them any paint work. Right now, it's really abstract looking feel. So I will give them a little coat shortly. Let me do one more thing here. Okay, so that layer. I'm gonna go to my dots erased. And blend these harder values. Actually, I should be using smooth normals here. It'll blend a lot better. So I don't have that line in the areas where there's darker sauce. All right, so that's enough for the sauce painting. And you know what? I think with the seeds, I'm going to wait to see what this looks like. I want to see what this looks like in Maya when I do my first test. And then when I come back in the next lesson, if I need to, I'll make the necessary changes that need to be made. You know what? Let me just go ahead. I'm going to add a fill layer, add a black mask, add a paint layer, call this seed fill. Let me isolate the seeds. I'm going to get my soft normals and do some very simple gradation. Let me sample one of these colors. Yeah, just to something like that. All right, so we'll see how this works. Just a simple toning of the bulb. I think that's it. That's it for this lesson. So the top sauce and the cucumbers, this is their preliminary pass. And then the next lesson, I'll start working on their utility maps. When I come back in the next lesson, I'm going to have these textures exported to Maya, and I'm going to apply them, the base color map, and I'm also going to wire these base color maps into subsurface scattering. And then I'm going to play with my roughness to see what type of roughness I'm going to want on each of these parts, on the sauce, on the actual cucumber, and this top area. So I'm going to be dialing in just general roughness. And when I figure it out, I'll just come back in here and start painting those utility maps to finalize the cucumbers and the top sauce. So I'll see you guys in the next lesson where we finalize the materials or the shaders for the cucumbers and the top sauce in Substance Painter and Maya.